Hello, this video continues my discussion of primary literature and secondary literature, something I've already discussed in a previous video. And I talked about the example of reading a book by Aristotle versus reading a book about Aristotle. And I said this is an example of a secondary source on the topic. This is an example of primary source by Aristotle. I said that the analogy of traveling is useful. Reading primary sources is like traveling, going somewhere, getting into something and starting the experience, that it is not fully clear, it is not fully intelligible at the outset. That's a desire that corresponds to reading primary sources. And there's a desire distinct that corresponds to reading secondary sources. And that's the desire to know things in advance, before we get into them. The desire to know about a topic before you get your teeth into it, before you get your hands dirty. To get a map of knowing in advance what you should pay attention to, what is significant, what other people think, what other people take to be significant about Aristotle, for example. So with that analysis in mind, I just wanted to make this point that we shouldn't naively think about the question, what should I read? Primary or secondary literature? Which one is better? When we ask that question, we might mistakenly think that these two kinds of readings are responses to the same desire, one desire, whereas I think they correspond to two different desires. One of them is the desire to get into something, to get involved, not fully being prepared, acknowledging that we are not fully prepared. The other one is the desire to be prepared, to know in advance. To be prepared and know in advance about something from a distance. Now, I want to ask this question. I want us to think about this question. Is it possible to be prepared before we get on a journey and get stuck on the preparation phase? Is it possible for me to start reading books on Aristotle, books about Aristotle, Aristotle's politics, Aristotle's ethics, and keep reading about Aristotle and other philosophers? Especially, for example, a very efficient way that I seem to be able to do that is to go through the series of books called Very Short Introduction to so-and-so, Very Short Introduction to Spinoza. And it would be an unending cycle, not just because, an unending process, not just because there are so many books out there that I can read, but because I might get stuck into entertaining this desire of remaining at a safe distance from what I want to understand. I sometimes feel that a book like A Very Short Introduction to Aristotle or A Very Short Introduction to Wittgenstein, a book like that is not just a preparation to read Wittgenstein or Aristotle, but maybe a license of why I don't have to read it. Now, why I don't have to read Wittgenstein himself, Wittgenstein's own work. Because I can understand Wittgenstein from a very safe distance and very comfortable place of reading that short little book that promises to give me an idea about the entirety of a person's life and work. If I can do that, and if I can start talking about the philosopher through that means, through that medium, by that way of thinking, and knowing that after I read that very short introduction, knowing that there's a lot more to learn, there's a lot more to do if I actually want to get close, to get into the primary literature. There's so much to do. And there's that amount of work can be intimidating. It can be disheartening and discouraging, because I realize that to read a philosopher, I need to spend years, not just weeks or a weekend. So I might get comfortable with that safe distance, that knowing about, that being able to talk and think, and getting the license to not actually travel to the works of these people. So in that sense, it is different from traveling, because a travel guide might entice me to do it, to go on the travel and to get myself exposed, even though my exposure would be filtered through the lens, through the framework of the travel guide, but I'm at least going out there, getting out there, getting in the middle of the actual situation, the actual condition. But the same doesn't necessarily happen with exposure to secondary sources. Instead, we might get comfortable with the safe distance. Now, I want to finish the discussion by talking about the ultimate form of reading from a safe distance, reading about life from a safe distance, and preparing in advance, preparing for life. And the paradigmatic case of preparation for life is, in my view, is found in the genre known as the self-help books. The self-help genre is the ultimate form of preparing for something in advance. A self-help book, if you have read any of them, and I have, I've read my share, maybe more than my share of self-help books. I've exposed myself to that genre. There is this promissory note in self-help books that I will promise you to be prepared by the end of this book, that I will help you adjust your mind. It is the self that is being helped, not the world, to prepare in advance, to remain at a safe distance. You have to focus on changing yourself according to the genre, according to this self-help. Prepare for life, and this life that we see is going to be presented as a life of success, as a life of pleasures, and a life of control and dominance over the accidents and the chance element of life. And it seems even, it would be fair to say that this life that is portrayed in the self-help genre is an unlimited life. It's a life that will never end. And we are preparing for it. We are preparing for its unending successes and pleasures. Now, this is in stark contrast to the works of philosophy, where we don't prepare for life, but instead we realize that we are already in the middle of it. We are already in the middle. We are entangled with life. We are already in the process, and we are facing our limitations and our mortality. If self-help books prepare us for life in advance from a safe distance, works of philosophy, good works of philosophy, prepare us for death, to confront our own limitations. This is, I think, a very sensible way to contrast the two, as preparations for life and an illusion of its infinitude, and preparation for death and the recognition of the finitude of life. One is the self-help genre, the ultimate secondary literature, and the other one is philosophy literature, the ultimate primary literature. Maybe just one layer removed from the actual concrete experiences of life. All right, thank you for your attention, and if you have any thoughts about these reflections, please let me know. Otherwise, I will speak to you soon.